My name is Michael Oshindoro, and I'm a graduate student of African Cultural Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Our panel has taken a different shape. There are some of you who are here for a different panel, and this panel is merged with the subsequent, the previous one, which is the comic books and graphic novels in the classroom. I want to say thank you to Oscar, who gave me a call last night, talking about the importance of, the possibility of matching this. I'm okay.
I think the reverb is from your phone.
Okay. Okay, so and I believe that matching this animation panel with the comic books and graphic novels in classroom panel even gives us a broader chance for conversation. I want to recognize the presence of Dr. Eric Kobe of Grand Valley State University, who is the organizer of that other panel. Like many of you, I was at the LSA keynote speech delivered by Femi Odubele, where the renowned filmmaker talked about the relationship between the African storyteller and the authenticity of the creation of that story. One of the key takeaways for me from Odubele's speech is his emphasis on the need for African storytellers to be more intentional in their creative process. I thought that the panel on animation and the one on comic and graphic novels helps us even situate Femi Odubele's speech, in a broader context. I am not sure of any other panel that really takes Femi Odubele's speech and applies it. And so we are very lucky to do that. The storytelling medium of animation, for which I'm here, and the practice of it in Nigeria fits into that broader narrative, as well as that of many of the panelists that I introduced. So I am excited to chair this panel, and I want to thank the organizers of LSA for giving us this big tree under which we could all sit to talk about the topics that concern African studies. We have in this joint panel visual artists who do work in comics and animation, visual effects, right, and many other forms of visual forms. I think of these guys, who I will introduce soon, as a new generation of African storytellers. They are the progenies of African storytellers that scholars like Aro Shoaib, Isidore Ogbewo have talked to us about. I'm thinking about the broad spectrum of storytellers who really became our grandparents who tell us tales under the moonlight, to the ones that are more professional storytellers who we call griots. Like their ancestors, this new crop of visual storytellers who we can place in the outer circle of Senegalese Ousmane Sembène, Alassane Mustafa from Niger. They offer themselves as channels for the transmission of culture and history. And more so, like their predecessors, oral predecessors, who were masters weavers of stories. This new visual storyteller sees the creative freedom to represent history, culture, and quotidian life in more impressionistic ways. These people mine tradition and cultural repertoire, and they remediate myth and legends in visually captivating ways. But with this set, fidelity to the narrative is always a contested terrain. They are constantly taken from the past, meshing fact with fiction to create a socio-cultural intervention and impose their imagination on the future of Nigeria, Africa, and the world in general. The panel of this panel, the aim is to promote a dialogue between the sites of cultural production and the site of knowledge production. By bringing artists and academics together, I hope to create this connection that move us beyond or move the academic discourse toward meaningful public engagement. Visual expressive forms like film, comics, animation are not just about representation and symbolism. They also ask us to reflect on the business and enterprise of culture. In telling authentic stories and framing local narratives that have potential for global reach, the artists, the question I have is that these artists, do they have, what kind of duty do they have in the processes of their storytelling? Animation and comics are promising areas that Africa and Nigeria can export their cultural values, but through which they can earn income. But what happens when market demand bears down on cultural imperatives? The animation industry in Nigeria, and the comic industry too, well, I use the industry very lightly, has drawn attention from local and international players. A noteworthy partnership between Kugali Media, a Pan-African storytelling company, and American giant Disney Animation has resulted in an animated series called Iwaju, Yoruba word for future, or forward, which will be released globally this year. Additionally, Kizazi Moto, a 10-episode animated anthology showing stories of various African societies, just premiered in Johannesburg, South Africa, a few days ago. This project attracts both continental and international attention to the promising space of animation and comic in Nigeria. But while we talk about this international attention and traffic, let us come down to the ground zero. On the local level, Lady Buckets and the Motley Monsters, the first feature animation created in Lagos, Nigeria, was acquired by Netflix to give a broader, opportunity for audiences. Other earlier projects, such as Mark of Ulu and Shade by Mila Louie, also demonstrate the potential of this medium of animation and this space that is growing. This year, just this month, Gami and the Living Things, another feature-length animation premiered. So, despite the limited government support, these guys, I'm trying to make it less formal so that these artists, many of whom are self-taught, have formed a guild of storytellers and receive support from international, personal, cultural organizations, the US Mission in Nigeria, the Goethe Institute, the French Embassy in Nigeria, and they continue to have this mutual exchange and partnership. So my focus for this panel is to highlight the advancements that is being made in the Nigerian animation space and commend the hard work of the professionals. This number is not all that is there. There is a bubbling space of animation in Lagos, in Abuja, in Port Harcourt, in Kaduna. And I also wanted to stress that I'm very biased by mentioning animation and animation. But comics is also important to stress because just a few months ago, or maybe late last year, Jide Martin of Comic Republic struck a deal with the Universal Studios, right, to make a great project. So let me just skip all of that, but I also wanted to stress that the reason I have organized this is to also say, what are the promises of animation for the visual culture in Nigeria? What are the promises of animation for our visual culture, particularly Nollywood? My first panelist is the director of Lady Bucket and the Motley Busters. Adebisi Adetayo is a 3D animator with over 20 years of experience. He is the founder and technical director at Text-Poetics Animation Studios. They focus on computer animation, visual effects, and post-production. Adebisi's 32AD is also an academy of art where he trains young aspiring artists in the practice of animation. He is a certified instructor for Autodesk, a license that he got in Egypt in 2011. He has made a name for himself in both animation and film, having worked on multiple Nollywood projects. Adebisi, you're welcome.
Thank you.
My second panelist is ex-star Kemi Badamosi, a filmmaker and award-winning stop-motion animator. I say that because we have this very strong. She is the founder and artistic director at Radiosity Media, with a remarkable talent in 3D motion animation, 3D motion, stop motion animation. Kemi has received numerous recognitions and grants for her work. Kemi is a 2023 Berlinale talent. Just Google it. And just a few days, no, not a few hours ago, she got back from Switzerland, where she's just going to, survey the land for what is possible. But from Switzerland, she has just come back from Annecy, the biggest animation festival in the world.
Yes.
Kemi's studios. Kemi's works have received numerous recognition on international level. My third panelist is Uche Anesiuba. Uche is the co-founder of Quadrant Studio Animation. Uche is a 3D generalist and one of Nigeria's finest visual effect artists.
Yes.
His unmatched skill in blending live action with computer-generated images brought him to the forefront during the global pandemic lockdown in 2020, when he made a video that shocked the world. Unfortunately, you'll not be able to watch it, but you can follow him on Instagram to see what I'm saying. If you have watched Kunle Afolayan's Netflix original, Anikulapo, then you have met Uche. Uche is one of the team of visual effects artists who created, for me, the most significant sequence in that show.
Yes.
I'm talking specifically about the bird scene.
Yes.
If you've seen the film, you will know what I mean. And the next panelist is Tunji Anjorin. Tunji is the owner and the CEO of Panoramic Comic. It's a privilege to meet Tunji in person. Your work I know through my roommates in Madison, and we talked a lot about you. So it was a pleasure shaking your hands. Tunji also just launched his animation studio. Studio Runner. And we have an opportunity to see some of Tunji's work. But before I go on to show those productions, I wanted to give Dr. Eric Covey of Grand Valley State University a few minutes to tell us about your project, your relationship with Tunji. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Well, I think I'll just tell a very quick story about how we ended up, Tunji and I, my friend here, ended up together in this catalyst. So I was a Fulbright scholar at the University of Abuja from 2018 to 2019, and then I returned to the United States. 1 year later, in May of 2020, at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, I received an email from Tunji Anjorin. He had gotten my name from Aisha Abdullahi, who was working at Panoramic, who I knew from literary circles in Abuja. And he had reached out to me about this kind of comic book collection for Panoramic about Nigerian history. And I was very interested at the time in incorporating comic books in my classrooms in the United States. The unfortunate thing was, at that moment, I did not have a lecturing job. I was unemployed. but it ruminated, I kept thinking about it in ways that I might do this later. 1 year later, actually 14 months later, I emailed Tunji again. I had been hired to teach African and world history at Grand Valley State University in Michigan. And as part of my job, I would have one of my classes would be a 100 level class on world civilizations. So a kind of course that you could just design around whatever you wanted. And I decided that I would focus the class on African women and historical biography, and I would use graphic histories, comic books, and other things to engage students, most of whom were history majors, engineering majors, nursing majors, to introduce them to African history, Nigerian history, and especially from the kind of perspective of women. So at that point, I wanted to acquire these comics. The DHL shipping costs were expensive. Fortune, though, intervened again. My university gave me a small grant to purchase the comics. I got them. I used them in the class. My students loved them. The first semester I used them, Aisha and Tunji both zoomed into the class. Tunji told my students at the very beginning he had a very controversial opinion that he preferred DC to Marvel. My students love this though, right? My students typically don't know a lot about the continent, about Nigeria. Aisha talks specifically about women in northern Nigeria. We have read the Queen Amina comic book. And since then, I've continued to use these. One semester, I paired them with Queen Amina film here in Nigeria to give them these different perspectives on the story. When we read the comic books, we think about storytelling. So fast forward to last year, he and I were supposed to be on a panel together. I got COVID, I couldn't come to Nigeria. The panel was rescheduled this year, but I was also, yesterday I did an immersive historical role play of the All African Peoples Conference, including some folks right here, Tunji and Oscar Michael, who Aduke Gomez had introduced me to. And I had already seen these kind of two panels were happening at the same time. Oscar had the idea that we should all just kind of come together because my experience, and I think probably a lot of yours, has been that people who play games, people who are into animation, people who are into comic books, that's a very similar kind of community. So I met Michael today and we kind of made this happen. And I'm just happy to be here. And like I said, I knew Tunji was doing animation stuff, so this just made more sense.
Thank you, Eric, as you would prefer. I wanted to I want to begin with the so part of the way that this panel was set up, so you should mind our messiness. And I wanted to so I want you to have a snippet of some of the works that these guys have been doing. So they're just about 2 minutes long. So we'll go through them one after the other. Sure. Yes, I think it's sharing. Yeah. So we're doing it's sharing now, right? That is just one of the many productions that is coming out of Studio Rad. And I want to thank Tunji for your work and the also how. Good. So Ikenga is the current project at Quadrant Studios, and Uche may have to answer some questions, but let us see what is up to.
Hopefully one doesn't go from my laptop. Yeah, okay.
Options.
Yes.
No. The next one. Yes. Did you sign it?
Yes, I sent the second thing, second one.
Yeah, so the
Thank you for your time and thank you for your patience. Now that you have a feel, now that you have a feel of what these artists are up to, I believe that you are already, you have questions that you would like to ask them. But I want to begin by having this conversation on a more personal level for each of you. And you can take as brief as 1 minute to answer this question. I want to ask, how did you come to animation? And for Tunji, how did you come to comic? What spurred that interest? I know it's going to be a long story, but I want you to help me condense everything into a very short, precise response. How did you come into this trade, this art, and why is it important to you? Should we begin from Esther?
Okay. Okay. How did I come to animation? Well, I think it was something that was going to happen. It was something that since I was a child I've always loved. For me, the more the stranger question would be how did I come into stop motion animation? Because I had done 3D animation for about 8 years, so it seemed like the only thing that, I wanted to do. But when I got married and had kids, I couldn't cope with 3D animation anymore. It became, almost like impossible. And so it became their toys, the children's toys, moving it bit by bit, to just have those nice poses and take the pictures and all of that. And that's how stop motion started, using the dolls to tell stories. And then from dolls, it became us making the sets and the puppets, and having to release each film, maybe because it's stop motion is not common, or I don't know why, but for each film we released, it always had this, festival thing, and it was, I can do something better than this, then I do the next one. And then, okay, let me try another one, and then I'll do a longer one, and things like that. And so that's how it has been, up till this moment. It's been very organic in that sense, but in all, it's the one thing that, if I did nothing else, this, I would want to do this with or without all of the, things that come with it. It just gives everything. Yeah.
Thank you. So let me make a note that Esther's film, the shot you just watched, was made on maybe a 8-foot long, how many inches long table, on a table. So that movie the set was on a table.
It was on a table.
So yeah, not to give you Adebisi, how did you come to animation?
Well, I've always loved animation as a child, but I never really saw it as something I would ever do in life. I always wanted to study medicine. That's always been my first call. But while preparing for medicine, I stumbled into animation. There was this book, this advanced level mathematics book back then that used to have some CD-ROMs behind it. So I was going through some of the training materials in it, and I saw made with macro media. So that raised the question, you mean people actually make this thing? So I started making inquiries more about it. Back then in 2000, the internet in Nigeria was at 0. So I could only order for books. So I started little by little. I started with 3D Studio Max 4 back then. So it was a Bible, very big chunk of book. I started studying. So there was no software to actually use. Well, thank God for Computer Village for what it was. Yeah, it actually helped. We were able to find some of the softwares there. There was nobody to train you, so you had to grow organically and find your way around it. Then later, while I got into school, one of my professors, I did a particular project for him. So he gave me the opportunity while he was presenting in Egypt in a particular class. He gave me the opportunity to actually come there in the game studio. They were just starting out. So I came and studied with them for about 8 months. So that was that exposure in 2007 that really gave me a lot of level, even as I've just been localized completely and not had the opportunity to grow. Then I had the opportunity of working in SA for a while, then came back to Nigeria and started growing the team from there. Yeah, for us in 32AD, for me, it's been 23 years, but for 32AD, it's been 13 years in the making. And it was just in 2019 that we got our first big project. We're still that we are not, producing commercials is not allowed. We don't produce commercials. We bring it, we kick it out. We prefer to stay on content production. So it stopped us for a long while because you see money being dallied in your front and you tell guys, we're not taking that. They're wondering what's happening. But that way we were able to grow and we grew a very strong team that could build animation capacity over a lot of trying to stop after 5 seconds. You could really work for long hours. So that has been our story. So I came actually from an academic area into 3D animation. It has really helped me programming aspect. I actually studied biochemistry, first degree, but it still helped all the way. So thank you.
Kemi's ability to do what she does is also because of her background in engineering.
Yes.
So,
Okay, so I don't have a background in engineering. How I got into 3D animation. I think my very first memory was me being in the sitting room sketching my dad. And so it's, as they both said, it's almost inevitable. It's almost inevitable. It was almost inevitable. Growing up, going to primary school, nursery school, my parents would look at my results and be like, I'll be like, I got A in art. They'd be like, yeah, we know now. What did you get to maths and biology? So it was a given. Yeah, it was a given. Best art student primary school, best art student secondary school. But I've always been into the arts in general. So I used to be a social prefect. I used to organize plays, dramas. I used to run a dance crew in university. I think everything lends to each other. I think being able to understand motion, be it via sports or via dance or via drama, understanding timing, spacing, lends itself to animation. And so I think me getting into animation was the culmination of my life experience, starting from drawing as a kid to being glued to Tom and Jerry all through like after school hours and Samurai X and all the lots, to playing video games. And sometime in 2010, I was doing internship. I studied mass communication, by the way. So I was doing internship in Lagos Television in Ikeja. And there was this, then 3D TVs just came out, it was a thing. And they were airing this movie called Beowulf, really amazing 3D movie. And the people watching the movie were like, these Oibo people are finished also. And so I was like, yeah, this is something, it's software now, it's something you could learn. Like, what's there? Like, if you actually had the tools, you could learn it. And it was almost like a challenge. I took it upon myself. Luckily, in that crowd, there was an architect guy that I spoke to, and he had 3ds Max. So I got 3ds Max. I had like a cheap laptop, and I started learning. Ultimately, I got into Maya because almost every animated movie was Maya. So I'm like, I'm working in Max, I'm reading all the documentation, and then a new movie comes out, I look at it and say Maya. I'm like, am I not in the... So I ultimately switched to Maya, although I learned over the years that it doesn't matter the software. So that was my animation journey. I think that's it in a nutshell. So I don't stretch it. Thank you.
so when Uche mentioned Beowulf, that movie, and another one, Ratatouille, will inspire a shot that he is working on called Scalable. Scalable is about a rascal, street smart Lagos rat. Check it out. Tunji.
Thank you guys so much for being here. My name is Tunji Anjoy, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Panoramic. And my love for storytelling is from like 92. I remember being told stories from the Bible, and they were very interesting. And for me, I feel like comic books and animation are like cousins. So essentially, I remember watching the John Wesley Ship Flash TV show, and I was like definitely running up and down the house because the idea of super speed was very interesting for me. I got a A4 paper, started drawing, and then I asked my parents for all of the drawing tools. Fortunately, I dropped the pencil, but picked up the proverbial typewriter and started writing stories. Collaborated with people in secondary school to try and make comic books, because my older brother used to read decks of comic books, and they used to draw as well. But obviously fully Western inspired stuff. So like I said, I tried to do the same, but then I didn't get visa to study Angan with my brother in the US in 2006. So I was like, okay, you're stuck here. What do you do? So I said, okay, go back to your initial love for storytelling and comic books. So we founded Panoramic in 2006, registered 2007. I would have gone the traditional action adventure route, but I have a very stubborn co-founder who said, why don't we do a historical comic book? So out of that, Okyojo's Chronicles was born. Okyojo is the Ishakiri word for the all-knowing or all-wise, inspired by Tale by Moonlight. I caught your point in your opening statement of orally telling the next generation about our history. So Okyojo's Chronicles is a Nigerian historical comic series. In 7 comic books, we've touched on 7 out of Nigeria's 36 states. So we have Oduduwa, which is Oshun. We have 1897, which is Benin. We have Kinamina Part 1 and 2, which is Zaria and Kaduna. And then we have Inri Kingdom. Very proud about this. The origin of the Igbos, Anambra. We have Eyo, we're based out of Lagos, so we came back to Lagos again. Then we have Mary Slessor, which is Calabar, and then we have Jaja Bobo, which is Delta. So these are all comic books available in print and digital. And like I said, we come from a lot of storytelling, and the next progression for comic books obviously is animation. So we also had to pivot and look into what they call it more long distance and digital capacity, which is when we reached out to Eric at GVSU. And he already told that story. So he wired us money for the comic books. He said DHL was very expensive. True. Not knowing if you'll get it because he's never met us in person up until yesterday. But he got the comic book, sent him a personal set of everything. They used Prenomina Part 1 and 2 as a teaching tool for freshman year. And some of the students actually found out something I was not aware of, and I'm the editor-in-chief for all of these comic books. So that was amazing. And one of his colleagues, Elizabeth Ganson, who was supposed to be here as well, bought 1897 to use as a tool regarding the bidding, bronze, storytelling. So I think at some point in time, NFTs are or were a big deal. Blockchain is a relevant matter. So we also pivoted into an NFT project, which is the bidding bronze NFT. So I know I've taken a lot of time, but I just wanted to explain in detail sort of my entry point for animation comics. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Like questions or comments?
I think the only thing that I would quickly add, yes, so Elizabeth Ganson, she's using these 1897 comic books in an honors class, Grand Valley State University. And then I would add 2, I could have gotten the digital versions of these comic books, right, which would have saved me all that DHL, saved the university the DHL shipping. But Tunji at the time, and I agreed, there was something about the legacy, you called it, right? The aspect of having the comic book in hand. I think especially for students in the US, that this wasn't just some digital product from everywhere. When I brought the comics, every time I still do it, I bring in the DHL bag with the comics and I put it down, and it's this kind of production, that it's come from somewhere, right? It has a kind of like local specific origin. So that's the only thing that I would add.
Thank you so much. From the individual stories of these artists, one thing is clear, that these are self-taught animators and visual artists. All right. And I think that reflects on so many other things, questions of pedagogy, questions of teaching institutions, right? And I think that one of my own politics for organizing this is that we might have students in the audience or in the Zoom section who may have similar stories, right? And your story pick up for that. I wanted us to go a little bit deeper and talk about this space called animation and comic in Nigeria. We shy away from using the word industry. And I was wondering, why? But I'm going to ask that general question, which is, are we an industry yet? And that is quite, typical question to ask. I'm asking that question with a different purpose. What do we expect to see for us to call this space an industry? What are your own assessments, being that you have been around for a while? Let me begin from.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is your assessment?
Well, I will actually call, thanks for the question. I will actually call it an industry, sincerely. No matter how small a snake is, it's still a snake. Okay? It's an industry. Whether it's getting government funding, government recognitions, but most of the time when people use the word industry, it means it has a framework. But if it has a framework, I'm talking about a framework in terms of legal structures, in terms of guilds, in terms of communities and all of that. I think we're beginning to have that. But when it comes to government, we know that is going to be slow on our side, because I don't think we have a very good representative in the cultural department for maybe Nigeria. I don't know whether they're interested in it, and I don't think it matters for now. But I would definitely call it an industry, because there are several people who are actually feeding from it. There are 33 people who are employed under 3280, and I don't think that's a fluke. For you to be able to feed, the least paid person is about 90,000 naira. You multiply that by 33, that's a lot. I'm not talking about operational costs. So practically, it's an industry already. You want to shy away from whatever the name, maybe because we feel that it's not adding too much to the GDP of the country. Yes, it's not for now. It's not for now. But if we look at what's actually happened in the past a year plus, with Kugali, with Nigerians signing bigger deals. For example, in our own place now, we now have a particular US project also being produced by Mattel, being produced in our studio. So it's becoming what we thought is actually not going to be. And then we have the aspect of what they call the Omoberry series, which is actually, that's actually a big deal. It's a very big, so our children can actually, rather than just leverage on foreign content, we now have a local content that the kids can actually watch during children's bell from around 3 or 4 downward. So, but if you look at it, we've actually had that previously. This was Tales by Moonlight and some other Sesame Street that actually occupied that belt. So to be frank, it's an industry. It may not be a big one. It may not be making so much returns or so much additions to the GDP. The return on investment may not be big. Yes, we know. But every structure takes, every new thing takes time to put proper structures in place. I believe the same thing that actually happened to Disney. If you actually watch Pixar Toy Story, far back when they did the very first Toy Story, if you have you're playing it, you'll be surprised at the quality. The quality was terrible. And yet they were classified as the first people to make animations back then, as in 3D animation. But if you go and check the quality now, you wonder why you actually, when first place, even watched it. So every industry, every space is in a state of growth, locally or internationally. Whatever stage we find ourselves, let's call a snake and a spade a spade. It will take time to build, but it's a process.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, to add to what he's saying, yes, the animation, yes, we have an animation industry in Nigeria. I'll draw parallels with the tech industry and the music industry. In 2010, if you're a programmer in Nigeria, the conversation is, can you build a website? Now, are you an AI programmer? Are you a data scientist? There are other disciplines. There are startups in Nigeria that are raising tens of millions of dollars and are global startups and are making money. And so this growth has happened basically within a decade. In fact, it's at 2015. There's a place called CC Hub, not 2015, sometime in 2013 or so. They were raising funds, and the government thought they were a joke. Like, you're trying to build a tech hub in Nigeria. What do you mean when people have not eaten, when people don't have And the guy was strong-headed, and he did it, and he was able to get the likes of Google and Microsoft to chip in and put in money. Now CC Hub is the biggest thing. Most tech startups come through CC Hub. In fact, we had, oh yes. So they also they have a partnership with Facebook. There's NG Hub. In fact, we have a virtual reality arm where we create like Quadrant XR. We've had dealings with them and Facebook, but that industry it has grown so big within a decade. The same with the music industry. Early 2000s, it's a joke. Some guys going for 20,000 naira shows and 10,000 naira shows, and their parents laughing at them and all that. Now, Wizkid is, last I heard, he charges like 500K USD, where a lot of not A-list, maybe B-list or C-list American artists can barely see that kind of funds. So I think it's growth. I got serious with the animation space in 2015 because I saw the trajectory of things. I think the industry is clicking at this point. Studios are getting initial funding. If I recall correctly, Benga Jetomobi with Limitless were funded with about $1 million a couple of years ago, and they are currently on course to raise 2 million. Even myself, we're having investment conversations with local and international investors. He's doing international productions. So the exposure is happening. It's only a matter of time. Studios are building capacity to create content locally. And they also, over time, I believe, like with the Indian movie industry, those production quality would grow, would get better, and be able to compete internationally. So yes, it's definitely an industry.
Thank you so much. Esther.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just say brief. For me, it's really not as the question of whether it's space or an industry. You know, probably it's not something I think about. I think more of the fact that, yeah, you know, probably one of the reasons they call it a space is because it doesn't get to have, you know, a pathway to know, okay, yes, if I start, you know, it's just like in academics. You know, if you start as a lecturer assistant, you know, at the end of the day, you probably get to be a professor. You know, but in in animation, it's a bit, you know, it's almost like all of these guys are the ones clearing the grass right now, you know, to just so that there can be somewhere for the next sets to be able to walk through, you know. So that's in itself, you know, constitutes some of the challenges that make us that, you know, in recent weeks, I've had lots of conversations and I discovered that if you want to partner with Nigeria, a Nigerian animation studio, for example, you know, because we don't have public funding in Nigeria, it's a major issue, you know, and so, you know, the idea of doing a co-production, you know, everybody has to come with something.
Yes.
You know, and if your industry or whatever makes you together cannot generate anything, it's difficult. You know, so whoever wants to work with you has to want to work with you and needs to be able to have creative ways of making up for the deficits. So those are some of the issues that exist. But the good thing about it is that we are beginning to break through those. So somewhere, you know, if we have to call things what they are, you know, at stage, I think we're somewhere between the space and industry, you know, bottom line.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So I think for the sake of detail, I would say we are an emerging industry. And that is because clearly Walt Disney is developing African-inspired content. They had huge success with the first Black Panther. So they definitely see that there's a market there. The one world system of the Caucasian male being the protagonist is changing. Yeah. There's a lot of clamor for female-led stories, and also more colored or different, fresh perspective inspired stories. The thing about it is, I really think the business side of our creative industry is where there's a lot of lack. The infrastructural IP is missing. We've been featured in the Financial Times twice. Second time was February this year. And Korea, Japan picked that up. That's a subsidiary of Kodansha, for those who know. And we've never run a Kickstarter campaign ever. Every single thing is out of pocket or we generated revenue by doing a business deal with a bank, Sterling Bank, or Etisalat, which is Naimuba, or when GVSU ordered our comic books and it came as FDI. No matter the amount, it's important for us to not be seen as a hobbyist business, which is one of the biggest takeaways for me in the early stages of starting Panoramic is this cannot be seen as you are begging people to tell your story. You have to make a business case for what you're doing. Right now, there's sort of uncertainty in terms of you throw X in and then you get Y out. But in the midst of chaos, there's a lot of opportunity. So I'm not really interested in whether people think we're an industry or not. 10, 15, 20 years from now, those who stay on the path, the story will definitely be told. Let me piggyback off what he said. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s in the US, if you were a computer programmer, you were a nerd and you were not looked at, but those are the corporations that are running things today. Microsoft took 30 years, Apple 40, Dell about 40 as well. And this is in the biggest economy in the world, not to talk about Africa that in general is still a developing continent. So that's my take about the industry.
Thank you so much, everyone. Now, for many of us in the academia, you lost us when you throw around the figures and the tech, whatever. I want to take us back to the question of your work, your art, and relation to culture, right? Before I say that just so I can prepare the mind of the audience, and this is where we begin to take questions. Now, if you already have your questions, can you raise your hand, and can we also look to the Zoom meeting to see if there are anyone who have questions? But yes, I'll take your question, please. Very short, and then please shoot.
So actually, I mean, not quite the question, but like kind of a contradiction of what you are saying. But I remember my master's on intelligence of religion at national safety in 2011. And I knew the challenges I faced there. I was going to the internet, kind of thing that were actually there. And now, I see some of those things that push like challenge there are no longer there. The internet now, you have this real engine thing, whatever, where you can now do animation. One of the problems with animation in the US, like I said, pedagogy, they have not had the animation skills to know that. So that's why everybody self-taught. But then, one thing I've missed about Nigeria is that technology always comes to our rescue. So I said, taking the terms of GSM, we had issues with the GSM came and solved it. And now, in the admission, I think most of the problems are getting solved because with what is happening in internet now, you don't need much of training, and even the equipment is cheaper now. Yeah. So I'm believing that, I mean, in a short while, Nigeria will be able to take it.
Thank you so much. Are there comments, questions?
I thought I think in this that's my question for now. I admire you guys your diversity for breaking up new grants. My question is as to whether right now it's becoming economic viable for you guys who are making this content. What is the market out there? Is this possibly right now?
Right. So anybody wants to take a start?
Well, this is what I would say. Animation for now, if you're not very good at it, it's not profitable. You have to be very, 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 very good at it. You must know your way out and you must know your way in. What I mean in sense, in practical terms, is there are two aspects of it. If you're going commercial, that's different. You may not be required to be able to do more than 1 minute, except it's a commission where they're asking you to do something like 5 minutes maybe for oil and gas Animation is big. Really, is big. It's as big as oil itself. It's very, very big because practically every industry, animation can be integrated into every industry. You can get oil and gas deals where you produce, in fact, internal training deals. There's a lot that animation can do. Education, even pharmacy, medicine, animation cuts across practically every space. So if you are very good at it, you'll be able to play in more than one space. And that's where the balance is. Now, the beauty of it also, where you look at, you balance your costs in terms of the major cost you would have basically is PHCN. That's your number one cost, because the cost of running operations is very high. It's very high when it comes to animation compared to maybe other businesses, maybe the same, but the cost of running operations is very, very high. But you would, if you are very good at, we've committed like 3 years into it, and to a very good extent, you need a group of people. It's not something that you can do alone. Then you're talking about cutting even within a very short amount of time. That short amount of time is like 2 years.
Okay. To buttress his point, so if you're looking at animation in terms of IP production, TV series, movies, it's an emerging market, it's an emerging industry. We are still figuring it out. We see the possibility. There's a huge continent of untold stories, people we can sell to, kiddies content, adult content. A lot of us watch anime. Imagine anime of like Shark or anime of huge possibilities. There's also possibilities for video games, still animation. Starting out, a lot of us, at least myself included, with Quadra, did a lot of TV commercials, brands, banks, telecommunications, all the lots, training videos, obviously to keep the lights on. In fact, sometimes we took on virtual reality projects, mobile game projects, interactive projects. And the idea is to, at least we started out being very adaptable, to be able to keep the dream alive. Because the worst thing as a business is to be super focused and not be able to keep the lights on. But we also realized that there are pros and cons to that play. Because in doing that, you don't have time to actually create proof of concepts, things that can convey your IP to, say, a potential investor. And so you're stuck in doing clients' projects and keeping the lights on. And so it's like a treadmill. And a lot of times what we tend to do is save up a lot of money and jump off the treadmill and quickly do something and then jump back on the treadmill and try and sell that to a potential investor. So that's been how we've been playing along. Thankfully, success stories are emerging. People are currently producing long-form content, TV shows. There are more conversations around there. So right now, the long-form content is not viable, but you might be too late jumping in when it becomes viable, because the big players would have honored. Exactly.
Okay. Can I just say a point?
Sure, please.
Just in the way animation is right now, if you want to picture it like football. The young guys that go to the stadium to play all the time, is it economically viable for them now? No, it's not. But when you hit it, you hit it. Yes. Then it becomes more than you even give. So that's essentially what it is right now.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to take.
There's a question online.
There is a question online. Let's just take the question online, and then I'll come to you in the audience here. So this question is from Norma. Norma asked me, the panelists. Thank you for your wonderful exposition. Have any of you ever been told that animation or comic is an elitist form of storytelling? If so, what are your reactions to that type of narrative? So let us take shots. You have something related, please.
Related to that.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. So I said an African storyteller. How do you assess the question of reception and audience in Africa? And the reason is, when Michael was speaking about some of the achievements, signing deals outside African all over Africa. Some of us are Africans in Africa. We seem to have a lot more relationship with what you do, right?
Yeah.
We like it. But what about within the continent itself? Stories like Ghana and all of these things, they are autochthonous, they are generated from African stories. But what happens when African stories are not accessed by Africans? Yes, they're accessible to them. Yeah, so the question of accessibility and accessibility is not really that. So very briefly.
You're very right about that. It's just like the story of Wakanda, okay? Now, whenever you're producing a product, you have two objectives in mind. Who are going to be your consumer and the buying power of your consumers. Now, for us, don't consider animation as animation. Consider it as a product, okay? The buying power for most Nigerians don't have the buying power for animation. Forget about it, they don't. Producing anything beyond commercial states, in terms of 45 seconds to 1 minute, Nigerians are not going to buy into it. So, because food comes first, then everything else. Okay, but if you're producing, when we produce, we try to take, yeah, it's still around the Nigerian concept or the African concept. But I'm not trying to sell it to a Nigerian because he knows the story already. Probably he hasn't told the story 50 million times. Even if I modify it and all of that, it still may not actually appeal to him. But a Nigerian in diaspora who has been in Nigeria for diaspora for like 40 years, who was actually losing touch of home and wants to have a feel of home again, would actually pay goodwill a lot for that. That's why you have even the Kugali, the content that is actually, that's the Kizamoto. Yeah, the Kizamoto is on Disney Plus, and Disney Plus is not available in Nigeria. So they know the people who can actually buy into that particular platform. So I personally don't produce to be consumed in Nigeria. Maybe later can have cheaper content.
I like that. Okay.
Yes, to add to Mr. BC's points. Sorry, what's the first question again? Let me see if I can answer both of them.
Have you ever been told that animation is yes?
Okay. First of all, I've never been told. Yes, that's new information. I think to answer your question, I think that animation is to Buttress's points, we don't have the buying power here currently. And I'm looking at the cinema space in Nigeria, and the people who have tried to do large-scale production, multi-million-dollar production, and they want to put all the bells and whistles on explosion and everything. Most of them barely made even. You understand? In doing when I dropped Skilly, the aim was to make it a visual effects movie. I had dreams, and but when I put it out there, speaking to investors, doing a lot of research, speaking to folks like Film One, I realized that a couple of challenges. The first challenge was that it's more economically viable to spend 10 million naira, hire a funny comedian, hire a couple of people, do something funny to make people laugh. When people go to the cinema, they spend the same amount of money on tickets. If you do a $2 million project and you go to the same cinema, it's the same amount of money they spend on tickets. Yes. And now your amazing movie with all the bells and whistles and explosion is side by side with Thor or Expendables. Yeah, that's a real competition. And so it's not been economically viable. But something I see that is slowly happening is Netflix has come in, Amazon has come in. Yeah, they are distribution companies, and they widen reach. You can sell to an African audience, you can sell to a diasporan audience. So I'm coupling that with the fact that there's this new trans-African movement, a global African movement, wherein Black Americans, Caribbeans, everybody is trying to identify with home in a sense. And it shows in where Afrobeat is currently. The interest they have, it shows in where Nollywood is currently. And I see that opportunity to sell to those markets in the animation space. And so I think for most of us, the focus is not strictly Nigerian markets, because if you do research, you'd realize it doesn't work. At the very least, you should look to sell to the whole of Africa. But standard, you should look to sell to the African market and the diasporian market.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to take your question. I see another, and I see yours. Okay, so I'm going to take your question, then I'll take that.
Sorry, thank you for the introduction. So I'm a consumer of complex stock and okay. I read Webtoon a lot, I read Mandok, but you've spoken about variety of comics, but like how can local comic who come up to these four platforms? They have the most like viewership, honestly. But still, I don't see the presence of any local content in Webtoon. They are really important from the USA. They opened up to so many countries just so they can harness viewership. But I read daily, nothing. Manga, they've incorporated African culture into Japanese, into Japanese mangas, African mangas, American. But African producers, I actually have friends that do what's called comics and everything. But like, I don't see like, is there any way that we can penetrate into this global things? And also the second one for stock image. I also control the stock, but like, I don't think know that there's actually local stock. So I didn't know about that. So like first, I watched a lot actually on Snapchat, different like that. So how can you produce this? Even just say that to diaspora, but there's other people here that actually consume this. So are you looking at our markets?
Not necessarily. Okay, sorry. So I can answer the comic question and I can answer the stop motion question, but I can just answer the are you overlooking our markets question. Not necessarily. It's more like the dream is to sell to the markets. The dream, we started this thing because as Nigerians, we loved storytelling, animation. So the dream was, we need to sell this to the Nigerian markets. When you pull up the spreadsheets and you're told the truth, or you do research and you go and meet the people, and you go and meet the people that run cinemas. Give you an example. One of the highest grossing movie in Nigeria is Wedding Party. The reason why Wedding Party is the highest grossing movie in Nigeria is most people who go to Nigeria are on a date. You want to watch 300. Your girl wants to watch Wedding Party. What are you guys watching?
Wedding Party.
Obviously. And so it makes sense to do a romantic comedy, or it makes sense to do that than to do animation. But conversely, if you're trying to sell only animation to the Nigerian market and you're trying to do like a Nigerian film, like an animated film and put it in the cinemas, you're fighting against the reality of the economic situation. You understand? First off, the buying power, and second, the behavioral culture in terms of people that go to the cinemas. And so it doesn't come from a place of elitism. It's more a place of economics, yes, and realism. So yeah.
From a comics perspective, we are fully focused on carrying along the Nigerian audience. Like you mentioned, our comic books are available in print, not just digital. Yeah, they are.
He said in some point that the influence comics section shop, right? I only see Archie, Iron Man, in some point like where almost like checking out the books in the comic section. I don't only see Archie, the 10,000 hour one. I only see the Iron Man also. It's also American volumes. Honestly, I don't think that's saying
you see Super Strikers.
Yeah, that's what I was about. Yes.
And a lot of people don't know that Super Strikers is actually a South African company. ShopRite is actually a South African company. So they are putting their own products pretty much on the counter shelf for you to buy if you don't have change. Our comic books are available in print. We've sold in Coronas, spoken to multiple Coronas, and Grease prints as well, donated to my alma mater, King's College. And we're very interested in carrying the local Nigerian and African audience along. In 2013 or so, we wrote to Comixology to put our comics on their website for sale, and then they said it wasn't up to our standard, so we built our own e-commerce website. And anyone in the world can go on www.panoramiconline.com and purchase our comic books. One of them is actually free if you don't have the resources to purchase, just to get an idea of our work. On our website, there's a video of the MD of Sterling Bank speaking about why they went into a business deal with us. If he will allow that, I would like for that to be played, because it seems like we're developing content for the international market all across the board. Some people are doing that for viability, and it completely makes sense. Being a starving artist is not cool. but also we are very interested in carrying along the local audience, the private sector and the government sector as best as possible. I'll round off by saying I've never been told comics are an elitist form of comedy. Initially, we started selling at 200 and then we went to 500 and then 1,000. Now it's 1,250 because of inflation and a bunch of aspects. Essentially, I round off by saying when you make a kite and it's outside and a storm comes, it's impossible for that kite not to fly. So the people who are consistent with what they're doing, like I said, and stick it out, eventually we'll see the outcome for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's answer the
I don't want to answer, but I also want to put in our consciousness that we have 10 minutes. Oh, so yes. Please answer that question.
Okay, so I worked in stop motion for a while. Honestly, I wasn't thinking internationally when I started. I was just thinking of being able to tell my stories and telling African stories. It obviously didn't take too long to realize that, it was more, the audience that wanted, or sorry, understands. Because, yes, I think understands. Because for me, I worked so hard in trying to see that stop motion could have viability in Nigeria. I tried to make sure that I went for the festivals, just to see, does this thing work? Would people watch it? Is this something people can connect with? Put in the festivals in Nigeria, just like to see how, it work with banks and things like that. Now I saw viability there. We're able to get grants, we're able to get festival awards, understand, and nomination. So for all of that, it's helped us. But eventually the market that I was on a panel, DFM, last year, and after I finished, there was this, hey, very nice, and the first comment, Africa is not ready for this. And I was like, so it's not even Nigeria now, this is Africa. It was in South Africa, for God's sake. But okay, I was telling you, I was in Switzerland last week, and I was now this is like many of the studios came together, Swiss, French. It's a massive stop motion project. When I entered, my head was like, what exactly have I been doing? That kind of thing. And on the last day, I screened two of my films. I know that when I was screening, because now the entire 50-man team that was on ground were in that space to watch the films. They all were so excited, and I felt cold, because I had seen their work. I've seen, and then I knew, where mine was coming from, and all of that. And at the end, I was like, this is the closing speech. Anything you guys want to tell me, just tell me. It's fine. And the feedback was, thank you for telling us your story. And it was different because I wasn't expecting that. I was looking at all the technical, issues. And I discovered that the one thing they didn't know that I knew was my story and our story. And so there's nothing wrong in us exporting our stories that people can also, because the truth is that one of the real challenges we've had is that we've not had too much of a place at the table. Yeah. We've had, since we're small, we kept hearing, the same stories. Even when the 3D thing came, it was Toy Story, Finding Nemo, right. All of that. Until recently that we had Encanto, Luca, and all of that, we started experiencing Latino stories and all that. So I think Africa also needs, the world needs to hear our stories. So it's something that, it is the people that position themselves now and tell those stories and do it consistently, that when the wind comes, we'll pick up. So I think that's essentially what I've got to say about that.
I will take your question, give me briefly, and then I'll take this one question. So
where's the end? I'm from indigenous production. I'm looking at it from the perspective of literary analysis and literature. And then I teach literature. Recently, I'm working on research of literary narratives in games. So I don't know if there is any hope for seeing these African stories even in games.
What?
Gaming.
Gaming, oh, okay, of course.
Yeah, I can.
If there are some
Let's speak to that.
actually, maybe if you have any examples and you want to suggest.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I would also take that question so that you can be able to answer it all.
Okay.
All right, so I'll try to do it brief, but as you were answering Inama's question, I remember very clearly how that just after the end of protest, I was leading a student organization and we wanted to tell a different story than the government was telling. And we wanted to do it through animation, but none of us had the skill. We reached out to an animation team, and well, long story short, we couldn't, because they were asking for 2 million naira that all of us pro-graduate students in the US did not have. Now the question is, I understand the experience of the marketing the product outside of it, no problems with that. It's great. I mean, it's just practical. But is there any concrete step to harness the access you have to foreign funding to make such content available? Such content cheap? Are there any concrete plans towards that? The sense I'm getting, I'm asking those, the sense I'm getting is a sense of, hey, it will happen when it happens. Let's break even first, and let's just make that money first. But I also think that except there's some kind of intentionality in thinking about making it happen, it may not happen when you think it will happen. Thank you.
Okay. Who wants to take a start?
Okay.
We are running out of time.
Yeah, let's basically rush. I think there's a company that's actually playing much in that space, and that's Mylio Games. They're doing a lot in the African gaming thing, so maybe you should check them out. Therefore, the question you asked, I don't think if you actually put the dice on the ground, I don't think Disney makes a lot of return on investment by selling their content to Nigerians or to Africans. If they should look at the charts, see what comes from the cinema, some of their content in the African space, I don't think there's anything to write them about in terms of the budget of their production. So if a big company as massive as Disney, that puts in millions of dollars into content production, why will I want to put my 300 million naira into producing content for a space that Disney is not making anything from? And I want to put my own content in that same space.
And you don't have the marketing.
And you don't have them, exactly. So it's all about, we love the African space. I'm Nigerian, 100%. But first, like you said, do we need to break even first? Yes. We would love to break even first. Then, because the government isn't giving any support, very soon they're increasing power tariff. It's going higher. So fuel is going higher also. What used to buy for 9,000 used to be 50 liters of petrol. Now you have to buy 25,000 naira to buy the same quantity of petrol. So I don't want to put it so hard for Nigerians. Yes, they can binge on it. Cool. But let it be sold where it's going to have value.
Okay.
Just give me 1 sentence. Okay.
1 sentence. Ooh, that's short. I'll try my best to keep it short. For the video game narrative, I used to work in a game company called GameSoul. We used to create mobile games. We had a game back then in 2015 called Giddy Run. I think there are multiple attempts to have like an African narrative. Most game companies typically do mobile games because doing a AAA game is typically more expensive than a feature-length movie.
Yes.
And so I come from an understanding of both worlds. So I also create virtual reality content. And I can tell you, like this, the Ikenga that is shown, the aim is to ultimately create a video game. But I can see a direct line for monetization with the animation first. And it makes sense to grow an audience with the animation first, so that if you choose to sell the video game, there's already some marketing done behind it, and they already relate to the character and they can buy. Not saying stories like God of War didn't break through. Sony is a different beast. But that's essentially.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. We have so many things that we want to do in 60 seconds. Kuye is asking a question about how, I believe he's saying, how can one break into the industry with a certification help?
Yes, yes, please,
Yeah.
it will help.
Okay.
But it's not based on certification.
Okay.
3D animation is basically what can you do?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Like I said, how are you engaging Afrofuturism for, I want you to say something about this because you're really interested in historical documentary. How are you engaging Afrofuturism within the design and production of, comics?
I think Chizazimoto is focused on Afrofuturism.
Yes.
And Iwaju as well. So these are things that are themes for both Disney inspired productions that are soon to come. Chizazimoto comes out on July 5th. So there's your answer.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to especially thank the panelists for agreeing to come. Esther, thank you for quality and condition around the Thank you. I see you've been wonderful, incredible, Tunji, fantastic. Dr. Kobe, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. As we are about to leave, Tunji would really like you guys to see a short thing. Please, for anyone who wants to step out can, but please look at
Just panoramic on my
So please, if you want to, and I want to thank the online attendants too. Thank you so much, participants, for your time.
Yeah, thanks.
The story itself, but still based on the Benin history. But it's the Benin because not of you.
It's a controversial conversation. It's not supposed to be. It's not supposed to be controversial. It's historically accurate, but pride and yeah. Because you know what's funny? I'm very fascinated about the Benin Empire. I realized in studying the kingdom that a lot of his supposed victories and was fighting with people. They don't, you understand? And it's like 300, and these guys had, so in the mythology, it was fighting, these guys were riding mammoths. Mammoths. They had money with them, they had things like what else you need. So it's a huge, so this is like, you understand? So it just sheds light on how big that empire is. And I think multiple stories come from the chapter of the books. Yes. I was trying to pitch recreating the walls of the village in VR. And this was like back in 2018. Now it makes more sense because now there's the ability to do verbally interactive characters using AI, wherein I can create a brain memory for each character. So, for instance, I can go study history.
One of that characters
Exactly. So I can copy and paste. I can copy and paste meaning in the 1500s, and I can talk to ChatGPT, answer me using text.
Sometimes do you just want to
take that information, put it there, and then you can be taught. Yes. So that's something I tend to.
I'll send you the link.
It's a huge, it's a huge.
They can just say
that's the culture itself.
For me, it's just crazy about it. I like the fact that you understand. Yes, and so it's not social representation. That's
for me to understand
the masquerade and all that. It's something that I've been trying, I said research maybe about 3 months ago, early in the year, for it's like social. It's a bit different from visual to the 3D. You know, so it's
When you do stop motion, do you typically go for short films, or do you, is there any piece of plans to do something like Kuba and two strings?
it's fun.
Oh, yeah.
It's fun. These people are, they will not like.
I know. And they didn't, they don't yeah, like that.
I don't know.
So it's
What's the mental example? Like, we're able to just break it off just like that. Also, they have to show out as a creator. That's nice. Huge for the pocket set, but wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
Look at this one.
Yeah. So
Video would like to know what people we
ability to tell the stories of our past to our children. And same time holds very strong lesson for every one of us. We have seen
So I want you to help me appreciate everybody. Thank you for your patience or staying even over time. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is about. Oh, yeah, of course.